All right, welcome back everybody to the Masterclass Mussar Mondays. I apologize for the delay, for the technical difficulties that we've had here, but we're finally live. So it is a great thrill and an honor to resume. This is class number 91 in our series of Mesillat Yesharim. I think this is the 25th class on the topic of piety. I think this might be, sadly, the last class on this midah, on this trait, and then we're going to move forward to the next trait of humility. So we are going to go back a little bit to page 435. Page 435 in this magnificent edition of the Mesillat Yesharim, way of the upright, or otherwise known as Path of the Just. And we're going to go to page, even though we're page 437, we're going to go back one page because I repeated what we learned multiple times since our last class. And if you notice, by the way, to those of you who are on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, you may notice that I have the beautiful Western Wall behind me. And that is because today is Yom Yerushalayim. Today is the day that the Western Wall was attained by the gift of Hashem. And the Israeli forces were able to conquer during the Six-Day War the Temple Mount and the area of the Western Wall. So we are deeply grateful and thankful to Hashem for giving us this great gift of Yerushalayim. So on page 435 on top, we previously mentioned that there is a difference between having full reliance on Hashem, being what other people call trust. We call it reliance. We're relying on Hashem completely for everything that we need, for everything that we hope, for everything that we dream. We have our reliance on Hashem, and on Hashem only, not on our own abilities, but on Hashem's gifts for us. But there's something else that we know we're obligated to put forward our efforts. So how do those two, having a reliance on Hashem and putting forward our effort, how do they work together? And Ramchal here is going to explain this. He says, if man's livelihood is fixed by divine decree, like we mentioned last week from the Talmud in Beitzah 16a, that all of man's sustenance is fixed for him from one Rosh Hashanah until the next Rosh Hashanah. So in that case, why do I need to work? Let me stay home and I have nothing to worry about. So there are many people who explain that it goes in a percentage, right? If you have 100% confidence in and reliance in Hashem, you don't have any worry, any concern, any doubt, then you're right, you need to put zero effort forward. But if you only have 90% reliance, then you'll have to work 10%. If it's 80%, 20%. Now that may be, but let's see what Ramchal offers here. Indeed, a person could actually have sat and been idle, and the decree for his livelihood, meaning the fixed amount allotted to him on Rosh Hashanah, would still be fulfilled. If not for the penalty, listen to this carefully, if not for the penalty previously imposed on all mankind, following Adam's sin of eating from the tree of knowledge. In Genesis 3:19 it says, by the sweat of your brow shall you eat bread. Asher al kain chayav adam lihishtadel, eze ishtadel setzorach parnasaso. On account of which a person is obligated to expend some effort for the sake of his livelihood. What does that mean? That means that every single person is obligated to put forward an effort. We're all obligated to put forward an effort. And says the Ramchal further, Shekain Gozar HaMelech HaElyon, for thus has the Supreme King decreed. And this is a tax that all of mankind must pay. We all must pay this tax. That is that we need to get a job. We need to work. We are obligated by a decree to get out of our beds, to get out of our chairs, and go work for a living. Now, you might ask, so in that case, what's the reliance? Says Ramchal, al-Kain Amru, for this reason, the sages stated regarding the verse, in order that Hashem, your God, will bless you in all your handiwork. I might have thought that man can merit Hashem's blessing even if he sits idly. To teach us otherwise, the Torah states further, in all your handiwork that you will undertake. Meaning, Hashem will apply blessing to your efforts, but not that your efforts are what brings about your success. It's not that the effort brings about your success, and we have to remember this. We brought many examples that there are some people who are so successful and they're completely untalented and ungifted, and you have others who are so gifted and so talented, so brilliant, and they can't make a living. So it doesn't work. Aaron, what are you laughing? You're laughing. Right? We know that that's the case, right? Hashem decides who's successful and who's not. Oh, if you go to law school, then you'll be successful because lawyers make money. No, that's not true. That's not true. There are plenty of lawyers who can't feed their families. There are plenty of doctors who can't feed their families, etc., etc. Who does the success come from? It comes only from Hashem, not your brilliance. Although you're brilliant, it doesn't come from that. Ramchal continues. He says, but although effort is necessary, this does not mean that it is the effort that yields the livelihood. Rather, it means that the effort is required of a person. But once he has expended the requisite effort, he's discharged of his obligation. So our only obligation is put forward an effort. The results are irrelevant. The results come by the wish of Hashem. If Hashem desires you to have that success, you'll have success. If Hashem doesn't desire it, you won't. Once he has done so and he has put forward his effort, there is already a place for the heavenly blessings to rest upon him. Meaning, you have to give God, so to speak, an opportunity to put blessing on something. If a person doesn't put forward an effort, on what is the blessing going to rest on? The effort gives the ability for the blessing to rest on something. He need not while away his days with extra industriousness and effort to attain this blessing. It is regarding this that King David, of blessed memory, said, Ki lo mimotza mimarav velo. I don't know the rest of the verse here. Ki Elokim shofet. He says, for neither from sunrise, nor from sunset, nor from the wilderness comes success. For Hashem is the judge. He lowers this one and raises that one. Hashem is the one who brings about success. V'shlomo HaMelech alav hashalom. And King Solomon said, of blessed memory, in Proverbs 23:4, he says, Al tiga leho ashir. He says, do not weary yourself to become rich. Hold back from your own understanding. The Chavetz Chaim, if you look on the bottom in the commentary here, you'll see a story. He says, the Chavetz Chaim illustrates this with a parable. A man has a barrel of wine from which he dispenses wine through a spout. If he adds another spout to the barrel, this will not yield more wine than the barrel already contains. All that will happen is that the wine in the barrel will flow out through two spouts instead of one. The obligation to expend effort on earning a livelihood is akin to opening the spout of a barrel. Hashem's blessings are ready to be dispensed if the beneficiary so much as opens the spout. Overextending oneself in this endeavor, so to speak, fashioning a second spout of the barrel, means only that the same heavenly blessing allotted him on Rosh Hashanah will flow through two spouts instead of one. The total amount, however, will not change. So our sages tell us a very interesting thing as well. I heard this also in the name of the Chavetz Chaim about the Shabbos. Some people will say, I have to work on Shabbos. How else am I going to support my family? Well, Hashem gives you all that blessing in a barrel, right? You're going to open up another spout. What's it going to help? You're not going to earn more. On the contrary, if someone works on Shabbos, there's no blessing to that money. There's no blessing, right? It says, Kihi mikora bracha. You know what the source of all blessing is? Shabbos. So when someone does not work on Shabbos, what happens? He increases the blessing that goes into his fortune. It's an amazing thing. The proper balance, continues the Ramchal on top of 437. The proper balance in light of the above. Ella haderech ha'amiti hu darkam shel hachasidim harishonim. Rather, the true way is the way of the pious ones of old. Osim torosan ikor u'malachton tefillah. Right? What was so great about those pious ones? They made their Torah study their primary endeavor and their work to earn a living subordinate to it. V'zeh niskayim biyadam. And as a result of this proper prioritization, both their Torah and their livelihood endured with them. And we see, actually, in the Talmud, there were many of the great sages that were abundantly wealthy. Greatly wealthy. And you wonder, how did they become such a sage and also amass an enormous wealth? Our sages tell us that's because their primary investment was their Torah study. Their primary investment was connecting to the Almighty, using every fiber of their being in studying Torah. But I also need to have a job. So they would also. Well, there was one who was a shoemaker, and there was another one who was a silversmith, another one who was a blacksmith, and you had all of these industrious rabbis, Tanaic sages, who were unbelievably successful, notwithstanding that they were great rabbis. Why? Financially successful. I don't want to say successful, right? They were successful in Torah, and that's what made them successful in everything else. So he says, Ki kevon she'asa adam k'tzas malacha, for indeed, once a person has done a bit of work, misham v'hala ein lo elo liftach bekono. From then on, he need only place his trust in his Maker and his Creator. V'lo li'yitztar al shum davar olami, and not distress over any mundane matter. So I want to share with you two stories. The first is the Chavetz Chaim that we just mentioned earlier. The Chavetz Chaim, as many of you know, he was a shop owner. He actually had a grocery store. Now, let me ask you a question, okay? We have a lot of people here today. Okay, who's going to be the lucky person, right? Clara, let me ask you a question. If you had an option of going to HEB or going to the Chavetz Chaim's grocery store, who would you go to? You go to the Chavetz Chaim's grocery store, right? You get to see the Heilige, the holy Chavetz Chaim, right? Bobby, you agree? You do the same thing. Who doesn't want to go see the Chavetz Chaim? Of course, we don't go to see the Chavetz Chaim. But you know, the Chavetz Chaim had a competitor across the street from him, and it wasn't even a fair contest, because everybody would want to shop at the Chavetz Chaim. But you know what the Chavetz Chaim did? The Chavetz Chaim would open a store Sunday morning, and he would let one customer in at a time, and as soon as the customer left, the next customer would come in, and as soon as he made enough money for that week, for that coming Shabbos, he would lock his shop. He'd say, go to my competitor. I have enough money, I'm done, you can go to my competitor. That's the Chavetz Chaim. That's a person who understands, I need to do my hishtadlus. I need to put forward my effort, and that's it. My father, I want to share the second story is for my father. I may have shared the story before, but my father was a diamond dealer for many, many years, over 30 years. He was working in the diamond industry in New York City. He would go to 47th Street, and my father specialized in a certain category of diamonds that he would travel around the country and sell to pawn shops and to, these little shops all around the country. And one time, and he would leave every week. I mean, we lived in Brooklyn at the time. He would leave on a Sunday night or a Monday morning, and he'd come back either on a Thursday night or a Friday morning. Every week he would travel. And we would always ask him when he came back. We were always so excited to see him. How was your week? And we'd say, thanks to Hashem, everything was great. Okay, one week he comes back and we ask him the same question. He says, you know something? I didn't sell anything. Nothing. Not a single jewel, not a single diamond, nothing. So my father wasn't concerned. Friday afternoon, my father goes before Shabbos, he goes to his office and he goes into his database and he starts putting in, this one I should call back in 3 weeks, this one I should call back in 4 weeks, this one in 6 months, etc., etc. While he's there, he gets a phone call. It's from someone he didn't even bother to go see. It's from someone who he hasn't done business with in a very long time. He says, I need this specific parcel of diamonds. Would you have it? And it was a big parcel. And my father, in that one phone call that he had absolutely no effort put forward for it, he sold the amount he would have sold the entire week. And my father that Shabbos told us at the Shabbos table, he says, you see, here's the lesson. He says, my job was to go around, to go to Detroit and go to Chicago and go to Houston and go to Dallas and travel around the country and ask and try and put forward my effort. But you know where the results come from? From a phone call. I didn't even try. It comes, you put your effort forward here and the results come here. That is the fundamental idea our sages keep on repeating to us. And here Ramchal is stressing this idea that someone who is a sage, someone who's a pious person, has no worries about their livelihood. They don't have a single concern. Where am I going to earn my living from? That's not your concern. All you have to be concerned about is that you are putting an effort forward and relying on Hashem. The Ramchal here continues. This attitude will serve him in acquiring piety. Oz tishoyer daite pnuye v'liba muchan l'chasidus ha'amiti v'la'avoda hatmima. If one can put his worries and preoccupations to rest by internalizing the above, his mind will remain free and his heart prepared for attaining true piety and for carrying out the perfect service of Hashem. So this is a very important chapter, chapter 21 in Mesillat Yesharim, in Way of the Upright. Now we're going to read now the summary that ArtScroll has prepared for us here in the middle of page 438. The way to acquire the trait of piety is through deep and extensive contemplation about matters that bring a person to fear and love Hashem. Pondering Hashem's greatness, in contrast to man's lowliness, will bring one to revere him, while pondering the various aspects of Hashem's fatherly love will bring one to love him. One may also find inspiration through a contemplative study of Tehillim, of Psalms, whose verses sing the praises of Chassidut, of piety, and through reading Agadic stories relating the pious conduct of the elders of our history. Since mindful reflection is so necessary for attainment of piety, worries and preoccupations are its primary detractors. One can avoid these distractions by internalizing the truth that a person's livelihood is decreed by Hashem, and he can do nothing to alter it, for better or for worse. While one is required to expend effort to earn a livelihood, he must remember that the success of his endeavors are not due to his efforts, but rather to Hashem's benevolence. The pious person will therefore not exert himself unduly, but instead trust in Hashem that his requisite efforts will result in Hashem providing his sustenance. So this, Ramchal is telling us here the importance of being in a direct connection with him. You see, we can all get distracted. In our world that we're living in, there are people who invest so much in career. There are people who invest so much in titles, in degrees. Great, you have to do your hishtadlut. You have to put forward your effort. But you have to also remember that it's not the effort that brings us the success. It's the blessing of Hashem that brings about our success. The effort is the vessel through which God sends that success. And I can't even tell you how many people I know that, opened up, silly businesses, like, things that don't make any sense. People who were not very bright and had unbelievable financial success. It's not because of their brilliance. It's because Hashem wanted to bless them with financial success. And whatever effort they put forward brought about a vehicle through which Hashem could bless them. So are there any questions before we move on to chapter 22? You can unmute your microphone if you have any question. Okay, let's continue. We are on page 439, chapter 22. And this chapter is the chapter of Anava, humility. Now, we have spent 25 classes. That's the equivalent of almost 8 months on the topic of piety. And piety, again, is not a trait that's acquired just in a minute. It takes a lifetime to attain each of these traits that we're talking about. Piety means that we go above the required. We're not obligated, but we want to. Why? Because we love Hashem. And just like someone who loves someone else will go above and beyond, you don't have to buy your wife flowers every week, but you do it because you want to express your love. So the same thing is with our relationship with Hashem, is that I don't need to do all of these, quote, extra things, but I do it because of my love for Hashem. And therefore I go beyond what I'm required to show my endearment and love for Hashem. Chapter 22, Anava. What is Anava? If you were asked in this class to explain humility, what would you say is humility? So most people say humility means I stand in the corner and I say, no, it's not really true. That's not what humility is. That's not what humility is. Humility means that I recognize that everything that I have is a gift from the Almighty, and that I have nothing on my own. All right? Does anybody know how long we would exist without oxygen? Very short amount of time. Right? We'd be brain dead by 4 minutes with maybe a slight chance of recovery. 6 minutes, it's over. Right? And how much did any of us, accumulatively, you're all in your 20s, so right? So here we're about 140 years old, all of us together, 150, 60 maybe, right? 160 years combined between all of us. Do you know how much oxygen God gave us? And how much did we pay for it? 0. We paid nothing for that oxygen. And then we're proud. Look at me, I'm a gold medal athlete. You're nothing without HaKadosh Baruch Hu's gift, without the Almighty's gift of oxygen. Oh, you can also move your muscles. You have bones. You have nourishment. You have a whole system that operates, a whole recycling system in your body, and you're saying that you take credit for anything? That means you don't understand your relationship with Hashem. Anava, humility, true humility, is recognizing that every single thing that I have is not for me. It's not from my doing. It's from Hashem's gifts. We already spoke above in chapter 11 about the disgracefulness of haughtiness, of arrogance. Umiklola nishma shevach ha'anava. And from that discussion, the praiseworthiness of humility can be inferred. Ach ata nivor yoser bederech ikar ha'anava. Now, however, we will more directly explain the trait of humility. By the way, it says about Moses, imagine Moses, he's writing the Torah. He's writing every word that God tells him, God dictates to him, and Moses writes it. Moses doesn't add a single letter, remove a single letter, he's not allowed to. Right? We see the small aleph in the beginning of the book that we just concluded, the book of Leviticus. Right, so it starts with the word Vayikra, and God called to Moshe, and Moshe sitting there, he's writing as God is dictating it to him, and he doesn't like that. It's a little bit, comes off like a little arrogant. God called me, God, right? So he, instead of writing a big aleph, he wrote a small aleph, so that it reads Vayikar, and it happened that God met him. It wasn't that he was summoned by the Almighty. Oh, right, he'll take pride. Look at me. Look how holy I am. But he wasn't able to remove a letter. So Moses continues writing. He's writing every word that God tells him to write. And what happens? He gets to the point where God tells him, and write, and Moses is humble more than any other man. Boy, isn't that humble? Moses is writing that. So how is it possible for Moses to write something like that in the Torah? So again, what is humility? Humility is knowing your relationship with God and knowing where you stand. Moses was more humble than any other human being on planet Earth. How do we see that? How do we know that? Because Moses was closest with God. There was no one in the entire history of the world who was closer to Hashem than Moshe. Imagine who sees the brightness, the heat, the danger, the awesomeness of the sun. A little ant on the floor, a human being who's taller and can get a sunburn, or someone who's, up in space and is even closer to the sun. Or someone who goes in the direction of the sun, he takes one of these SpaceX flights and he goes towards the sun. What's going to happen? The closer he gets to the sun, the more likely he is that it's going to disintegrate because of the heat. So who knows about the heat more? The one who's closer or the one who's further? The one who's closer. And it makes him all the more humble, recognizing, wow, I'm infinitesimally smaller than the sun. Now imagine someone who's the closest to the Almighty. The one who's closest to the Almighty realizes how much more he is smaller than even that little ant on the floor. The closer you are to the Almighty, the more you realize how small you are. Now, the idea is not that we're small people, but the idea is that we're reliant and incapable without Hashem's blessing. Small meaning, not that we're small people, we're great people, we're awesome, capable people, but we're also limited without Hashem's assistance. Even the most basic assistance, like oxygen, we would be nothing without it. And Moses was on the highest level of that understanding. So here the Ramchal continues. He says, "Ach ata nivor yose bederech ikar ha'anava." However, now we will more directly explain the trait of humility. V'sisbor agava me'elav, And from this discussion, the contemptible nature of haughtiness and arrogance will automatically become clear. Hine klal anava, see that the general idea of humility is heyos ha'adam bilti machshiv atzmu mushum tam sheyeh, for a person not to ascribe importance to himself for any reason whatsoever. V'zeh hefech hagava mamash, and this is the very opposite of haughtiness or arrogance, which, as described in chapter 11, consists of considering oneself self-important of his favorable attributes. Likewise, the results that flow from the trait of humility are the opposite of the results of arrogance and haughtiness. There are two basic elements of humility, says Ramchal on page 440. When we examine the matter, we find that humility depends on both. Anava depends on both humility in outlook and humility in conduct. For a person must first be humble in his outlook regarding himself. And only then, as a result, he will conduct himself in a manner of the humble. This is crucial because if one is not humble in his personal outlook, yet he wishes to behave as if he's humble, lo yeh elo min ha'anavim hamedumim v'haroim shezacharti lamala. He will be nothing other than one of those sham, evil, humble ones that we mentioned above. He's a faker. He's not a real humble person. Shehem michlal hatzvuyim asher ein ba'olam ramihem. Those fakers, you know who they are? They're classified as hypocrites, about whom we may assert that there is nothing in the world worse than them. We will now explain these two elements of humility, that of the spirit and that of deed. So, my dear friends, we're going to resume next week, chapter 22. It's going to be a very enjoyable journey as we hopefully soon, we already did 438 pages and the book is over 5:30, so we're almost done. Isn't that terrifying? Right? How do the kiters feel about that? It's like, can you imagine? We're almost.
We've enjoyed the journey, Rabbi.
Isn't that amazing? Isn't that absolutely amazing? This journey has begun. It's such a humble beginning, and now it's like we're almost, hopefully going to be at the point where we reach the point of Ruach HaKodesh, of divine, providence, where God will reveal holy things to us. So Hashem should bless us to have an amazing week, a healthy week, a good week, a successful week. To those of you who are on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, thank you so much for joining us. Please leave your comments below. If you like this video, please click like. If you didn't like this video, share it to a friend. Maybe they'll like it. Have a wonderful evening, and we look forward to seeing you next week.